on the drive back from closing of this trip, I remember talking to a good buddy of mine, Mike Casey, who's also in Insiders. I've known him for 10, 12 years, since well before storage. And I just told him, I was like, dude, I'm done with real estate. And he kind of laughed at me and he was like, I'm done. And I got home and I started working through the plan to figure out what that looked like. So we started looking, like I said, it's in storage in January of 2020. I started loosely looking. And I was like, when storage replaces my income, then I can exit my business. And then 3 months later, the preacher in the bell tower analogy, COVID came and shut all that down. And we went full bore. We went into this deal, found it in March 2020. We closed in April 2020. So we had a 45-day close. And kind of get into the acquisition a little bit. It was a 13,500 square foot facility. It was on over 5 acres. It was supposedly 25 to 30% occupied, and we found it from a wholesaler on Facebook. And again, we contracted this during COVID. I think that played into some of my ability to like get down there, and like everyone was kind of like not sure what was going to happen. And I just kind of jumped out in front of the deal. They wanted 240 for it. I just offered 245 and said, you know, we weren't going to do any financing or anything like that. And it worked out. You know, it was ugly. It's orange and brown, and the colors aren't exactly appeasing, but I leaned on Mike. I leaned on the people in this group with what I thought were my concerns and where I thought the deal could go. So this was actually a screenshot I took today. I still have a copy of the wholesaler's packet. You know, they're sending me numbers at 100% occupancy. If you look on the bottom, it says income minus expenses, which 90,000 on the middle, kind of the middle left, 90,000 income minus 7,000 in expenses is $83,000 net. And, you know, I think most of us know that, but for those of you guys who haven't run pro formas on a deal, do not take anything. There may be accurate information in these pro formas, but you got to take them with a grain of salt. They're sending them at 100% occupancy. They're sending rents that at the time we didn't think are realistic. I'll kind of get into where we're at now, and we've kind of got there and maybe gone past them, but that's taken 3 years to get to. And Chris kind of hit it on it earlier that storage is slow. And I think that's the thing. Everybody thinks they're going to get in and just rock all the dials to 100 and like turn a deal around in, you know, 3 or 5 months. And it's kind of like somebody used the analogy one time on one of these calls that it's like turning a cruise ship around. It's just slow and long and steady. Yep. So during due diligence, I kind of brought up that I was concerned about this deal. One of the things that I was concerned about is the population. And you can see these screenshots here. The population is declining. The upper graph is for the county and the lower graph is for the town. So as you can see, the whole county only has 5,000 people in it. It's very rural. Actually, I think it was a year ago, I took a sampling of people with deals in the Insiders that I knew were rural. And I believe I still own the most rural deal in the Storage Rebellion. And I'll still hold that up. I think we're at 22 people per square mile. And, you know, one of the things during due diligence, if you go down at the bottom, I kind of get into the median household income for the county that you can see. And as opposed to even, you know, it's 46% of the median household income compared to the state of Georgia and 39% national average. So it's a poor rural area. And that was definitely a major concern of mine. I actually did 2 site visits in 4 days because I flew home and I was talking to my wife. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to get on a plane and go back down there. Like, this can't work. This isn't right. And I went back down and just spent more time in the town and looked around, and I went to other towns, and I started talking to people at gas stations, like the clerks and just anybody I could run into. And it was actually on that second, actually, hold on one second. One of the fixable things that's one of the things that Mike always asked me. He's like, what are they doing wrong? Right. Which is easy to like, okay, well, they're doing this wrong. But like, if you fix that and just do the minimum viable product, what does the deal look like? You know, like, are you going to go bankrupt? And that's not necessarily a great reason to get into a deal. Like, okay, well, great, I'll just get out and break even. But it like started to alleviate some concerns, and I started to peel the onion back on what was really going on. And I kind of show here a little bit of the population. I had gone into it in the other graph. And again, I bring this up and kind of harp on it because it was a major concern of mine. I was like, this town's going to be like a ghost town set for Western movies in 5 years. And I'm going to own a storage facility that's half empty. If you look at this, the 5 mile radius run from the facility is 4,100 people. If you go into the 7 mile radius, it's 6,000 people. And based off of that supply, you know, sure, it says 27 to 35, and I'm running it out in a 5 and 7 mile radius because the area is so rural. And if you look in the upper right-hand graph, I ran it west from town too, which I'll kind of get into in a minute and why that is. And this is why, if you look at the dots, we are just outside of town on the way to the next main town, which is Thompson. We're about 40 minutes southwest of Augusta. And the reason you'll see this circle that's more on the left is I was like, okay, well, if we're pulling from more, like, I didn't want to like pull out of that other town and like kind of make my assumptions. I didn't want to make my assumptions correct just so I could buy the facility. So I actually shifted my demographics further where there was less population to see if the numbers would work there or not. And it seemed that they would. And after getting into the facility, we didn't have, because we were buying it from a wholesaler, they didn't really want to give us hardly any information until the day of, before closing, the day of closing. After we have it, I kind of took all of our customer data and mapped it. And this is only part of it, but 30% of our customers in this rural area come from 20 miles away, which I've always thought, and it's actually, I ran this for the last presentation or the case study of this, which was almost 2 years ago. And that number has actually increased. And the reason, if you go back with this left-hand circle, is if you go over here and look at all the dots on the west side of town, there's no other storage facilities out in that area. Even though that area is extremely rural, I was like, well, we'd have to pull some customers from that area because there's nothing out there. And then weighting it less on that other town as the population goes towards it, because there's 3 or 4 storage facilities there. So I'm like, we may get customers from there, but I wanted to like build the case that, okay, we would survive if we only pulled customers from this other side of the county, basically. So I hope that makes sense. And if you guys have questions about that later, we can kind of dive into that. But that was good data. And I bring that up because if you're looking at a facility and let's say that maybe your facility's here and there's a couple on this side, but then there's nothing over here. Like if you move your demographic circle over to that area, like what does that look like? If they're coming that way to places of employment, you're probably going to pull from those areas.